Okay, so you might have noticed that there are no chickens in Scrap Mechanic. There's cows, but they're just cows. So in this video, we're going to be trying to make a chicken in Scrap Mechanic. Now, this is basically just going to be a walker that looks kind of like a chicken. So anyway, let's get started. Now, I haven't done lots of walking mechanisms, except for the really simple ones, so this is going to be quite a challenge. So my first idea for this one is basically, it would lift the foot up, um, move the foot forwards, and then put it down, and then move it back, which would kind of drag you along the floor. Now, I was going to do this with a piston and a bearing, and see how it goes. Now, I didn't have loads of high hopes for this, but anyway. So I basically carried on and just made quite a simple thing, which had just two pistons and two bearings, but it would need quite a lot of logic pretty soon. Now, the problem was this, is that I actually tried to make it look like a chicken, and yeah, it needed a lot bigger feet, and just wouldn't work, basically. But anyway, let's add logic. So this is just going to use a logic loop, and I'm not very good at explaining things, so that's about as much as I can explain. It's going to use a few other things, but I can't really explain them, so let's just wait until it's all over. So then I started on the logic. Now this is not going good right now, but of course we still need to do one of the other legs since we don't know one at the moment. Now the logic was a bit hard, and I'm not great at logic and only started to learn, but this is how it looked after a bit. Not very good. You see, the controls just couldn't move fast enough, so they kind of just stayed in that position, which isn't the best. Now, it was quite obvious I need to make the whole thing slower, and here's where I got to. You can kind of see a bit of flex, but it's not enough really, so I think this might be a bit of a failure. But the one last ditch effort, I basically made it so the feet were a bit wider, and I thought this would help, and it kind of did. It kind of bounced up and down, but it didn't really help in the end, so yeah. So then I started on the second one. Now this was basically just going to use two pistons, and I was basically going to use the same idea as the one with just the bearings and the pistons. Now the logic still was going to be quite complicated, but I could basically copy it over from the previous design, so it wouldn't be too hard. So yeah, this is going to also probably make it faster as well, but I don't know yet, so let's get started in logic. And after a bit, this was how the logic looked. It was actually kind of simple, but there was still some stuff that we needed to do, but it was actually quite a good start. I did end up getting the pistons wrong though, since it basically reversed and didn't work at all. But I quickly solved that issue, so it didn't really matter. Now, as you can see, the pistons are basically going one after the other when it should be the last one should be going before the first one, which is why it's not working. But now it should work. I also added thrusters. Now this is to maintain balance. Now this was so when one foot went up, we put thruster downwards on the other side, which helped make it stay level. Otherwise it'd probably just flip over. Now I probably was going to switch it out for another mechanism later, but it kind of actually worked. It was going forwards, which was definitely better than the last one, and it looked pretty cool. So this was quite a good success, to be honest. It didn't work really good, but then I was starting to change some stuff. So now with the thrusters, I'm just going to use weights. So when we lift one foot up, the weights on the other side will go out to like try and counterbalance and basically change the center of weight. Now this helped loads, and it also made it look quite cool. Now this whole thing was actually going to work without suspension glitches as well, and in the end I did just use thrusters to turn, but anyway. Now, the weights was quite hard since to get everything right, it was just kind of hard, but eventually it did work. Problem is, the weights also changed the center of weight a bit too far forwards or backwards, so it did flip over sometimes, but that wouldn't happen too often. And this is already beginning to look like a success. Now, most of this chicken would be the walking, but we also would be adding a few other stuff later. Now, the weights were beginning to work, not very well, but it was still a step in the right direction. Now, I was still trying to get the weights right since it was actually quite hard, so I needed it just to be kind of perfect so it could balance on one foot, which is quite hard to do. Now, the balancing actually kind of worked from just a thrust of like pushing out the weight really quick, but it also did help with the weight moving out. I also added thrusters. Now, these were useful for turning. Now, the only problem is I put a toilet seat on and I put it backwards, so it looked a bit weird not being able to look where you're going really. But anyway, and it was also quite a rocky ride. But anyway, it's quite a good step in the right direction. So then I started putting like this big box around it. Now this will be the chicken's body. Now this isn't really going to look like a proper chicken because I can't be bothered to make it look like one, and also it'll look more goofy like this. Then I worked on the very important place where this toilet seat would go, so it'd be a bit like a saddle almost, but not really. Now the steering was reversed on this, which was annoying, but it did work surprisingly well. The steering was a lot slower since it weighed a lot more, but I still quite liked it. Now we're going to add suspension. Now, is this going to help? I don't know. I hardly had suspension for any of my cars or builds, but it might help us slightly. Now, it was quite helpful, but not the most helpful, since when we lifted one foot up, the whole other foot was basically lower because of the suspension. But after a while, it did start to work properly. Now, and after that, I actually added the proper chicken head. Now, this was not going to look like a chicken at all, because I couldn't want to actually, of course, make this look like chicken, because that would require proper work. So this thing kind of looks like a bit of a scuffed chicken that's, I don't know, it's very blocky, but it also is pretty cool, and I think it looks actually okay. Then I started adding the flying, well, ability, I suppose. Lots of people debate if chickens can fly. I don't really care. I just want it to fly. Now, does it fly properly? Not really. It kind of goes straight up, but it does lean forwards a bit, and with the turning, you can actually kind of control it. You can't really land, but that's not the fun bit. Now, then after that, I made it so the wings flat to make it look kind of cool. But in the end, it makes it look just very, very goofy. They flat maybe a bit too slowly, but I think it still looks pretty good. Now, landing this thing when flying was pretty much impossible, and you couldn't really flip yourself over, but it was still pretty cool. And I would say this is actually quite a good success. Now, it doesn't exactly walk the smoothest, but it also walks okay. It can walk on OK speed, which is pretty good. Now, this video was more like a bit of a goofy idea, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Now, this was actually quite a lot of fun to make. It was also quite hard to make since I'd never done a walking thing before, but I hope you enjoyed. Anyway, bye! Also, this chicken is pretty cool.